Good morning. I hope everyone can actually see. Uh, okay, 1 second, yo. Just 1 second. It's doing a test. Just 1 second, because it's clicking in and out. And okay, thank you guys for being patient. So, like last time, you guys know we talked about spiritual. So today we're going to be talking about cultural. Nice and sweet. Um, we're gonna make it sweet. That's what I'm gonna say. so, so we already know the series is we're on the move. So we're trying to move from victimhood to warrior status, and the whole goal is teaching individuals not to get stuck in the victim status. So when we, well, let me go back to last week and do a recap. So last month, sorry. So before we get started, I just want to introduce themselves. I put your names out here on the panelists, but just so they know how to contact you and your credentials. Okay. So go ahead. Y'all just jump right in.
Hi, my name is Michaela St. Luce. My credentials are I'm an LMSW. And if you need to just reach me for anything, you can just reach me at my Gmail, which is my first name Makila dot my last name STLUCE at gmail.com.
Hi, good morning. My name is Paula Jones, and I am a mental health coach. And if anyone needs to reach me, you can reach me by email at admiredj@gmail.com.
Thank you, lovely ladies, and thank y'all for getting up early. As you can see, some of us, we just this is a lot to get up early. So I just want to thank y'all for y'all dedication and getting up. So one of the biggest things that we talk about is warrior status and creating a warrior oasis, and that's just kind of teaching people to have this peaceful environment. So my name is CamiE. I guess I need to introduce myself. I'm a human service professional. I'm also a clinical trauma specialist, and I also am a pre-licensed professional for AMFT, marriage and family counseling, and a concurrent disorder counselor for addictions. So one of the biggest things that I always want to stem to is talk about trauma and how a lot of things come from trauma. So, which is why we're trying to create those that oasis. So today we're talking about to be. Let me just get my stuff or to be me or not let others, things, places define me. So we're going into culture today, and then I just like to kind of recap what trauma is, just in case someone's new to what we're doing. But it's just a deeply distressing or disturbing experience. In psychiatry, they have different terms where if we go into the medical, it's more so physical injury or an event outside a normal human experience. So trauma can lead to individuals feeling powerless, um, paralyzed. It can be overwhelming. So as we already know as professionals, sometimes it's our job to get them to know that they're already surviving it. Trauma is very individualized. It's an event. It's a place. So one of the biggest things we want to talk about is the ideologies about it and breaking it down what exists to them. So last month when we did talk about spiritual trauma, its ideology is does it exist? When we talk about cultural trauma, actually this is where it was way more information on cultural trauma than it was on spiritual trauma, which I thought was very fascinating. Um, and one of the biggest things we want to talk about is how do we heal from it? Because we know that this actually exists, but how do we heal from it? How does one identify themselves within the social community outlook? How do we avoid re-traumatization? Cultural trauma is also knowing the knowledge of the system and the systematic that is not going to change, or will it change or will it evolve? So the first question is culture. When we hear culture and the heart of the word of culture, what do we hear?
Surrounding body of people.
Yeah. Mm.
And culture is kind of like a set of like ways of doing things or beliefs that a certain group of people, adhere to. It can be based off of geographical location, or there could be subcultures within a culture. Something like that, like how Black culture within American culture, things like that.
Yeah. So we just talked about people, custom, language, traditions, food. We all just came off one of the biggest cultures, Thanksgiving. There are individuals who don't actually believe in those, how they call them, Hallmark holidays, but people still come. They gather with their family, and now when we're living in the world of social media, it's funny. There are songs that derive from it, dances, you get together with people, all of it derived from that. Culture is also defined as multiple cultures come from subcultures. I'm sorry. Subcultures derive from cultures. So we know those are like little small groups that come from the actual culture within itself. So we have a lot of people. My biggest thing is hippies, where they derive from different cultures and so forth. Bikers. Um, we can go on and on as far as it relates to subcultures. We can even look at some sororities. Any of those fall under where they create their own culture, but they derive from under a culture. So cultural is defined as relating to the ideas of customs and social behavior of society. Cultural trauma, which is what we're talking about, relates and occurs to when members of the group feel they've been subjected to a horrendous event and leaves these marks on the group, and forever making memories, changing the future identity. So we've got a whole future that comes behind us who's taking on these cultural norms that most of them didn't ask for. We didn't ask for it, but obviously we have it. So I'm going to break some of these down so we can go into our discussion where we talked about culture events. So most of these we know, where we talk about concentration camps, the Holocaust, hostages, surviving religious cults is huge. If you're looking at cultural, human trafficking, uh, race construct, Jim Crow, segregation, genocide, civil rights, Chicano movement, and then what we got currently going on is the Lives Matter movement. So I put them all together because we're limited today on time, but this is becoming a cultural phenomenon too, where we have these subcultures deriving from the black, the brown, and the blue. And I hope I got them all. Is that all of the Lives Matters movement? Because it's so many are deriving from it. Did I miss any?
I think those are the big ones.
The what? Which one?
I said those are probably the big ones
The
that
big ones? Yeah,
everybody
okay.
knows about.
The top ones, yeah. So one of the other ones that I wanted to um, really kind of go into was the effects of cultural trauma. So, because of race and creed, the ethnicity linger in the souls of the descendants, which is us, that are coming in. And many of these individuals who conform to their culture suffer from mental and behavioral health concerns because of the lack of mental wellness, because of the lack of not knowing what and where this derives from, especially our younger population. So, one of the questions that I want to break down with you guys is historical trauma the same as cultural trauma?
In a sense, because most times that's what it's based off of.
Yeah, yeah. That's where it's coming from.
Yeah.
Most of it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think historical trauma can definitely lead to cultural trauma. I also do think that there are some cultural traumas that aren't necessarily historical,
Yeah.
but definitely historical trauma, if you've looked at just our history in the United States, has led to several cultural traumas within certain groups of the culture.
absolutely. I agree with both of you guys. And actually, with the theorist, Nina West is who I'm getting this from, who specializes in cultural trauma. And she also specializes, she has a program called CLASP, and she works directly with youth and trying to break or minimize the traumas that we get from our culture. But it's a work in progress because we all know some of it we can't, no matter what we run from, we can't. We can try, but it kind of hits you in the face. So she's basically saying what you guys are saying. They're both one and the same. They're lasting legacies of oppression, some of them, and they're defined by undeserved communities and substantial threats. They are substantially threatened or threats to these individuals' mental health. So they named a few: Native American, the Hawaiian natives, Asian, Latin, African American, and we know we can go on. But these are the main ones where the data is gathered. So one of the biggest things that I wanted to talk about when it comes to culture is genocide. And we know this has happened quite a bit as it comes from cultural trauma. To if we look at the Native American, that culture, um, they don't exist. If you go look, well, not we're not gonna say they don't exist, but it's not where it was when it started because there was one of the genocides um, that we could actually name. Also, going into the Jewish community, Holocaust, slavery is a huge one when we look at cultural genocide because it was stripped. So, breaking it down is to define a deliberate killing of a large number of people from a particular nation or ethnic group, aimed at destroying that nation or group. So, out of the genocide derived cultural war. Do you guys agree with this? That because these genocides, this is why we have these wars where it's all lives, black lives, blue lives. Because of these, if the genocide didn't exist, would we have these different cultural wars? That's the question.
I mean, I think the genocide itself still stems from systemic racism. with certain groups. So I think at the core of it is the racism and the I want to say the top race or whatever, but just from the dominant group at the time, their beliefs and their customs didn't align with, say, the Native Americans or Africans or whatever the case may be. So genocide is a result of that racism, is just one of the results of how racism can manifest itself into a group. We saw it with slavery. We saw it with the Native Americans, the genocide. We've seen it today with black men and women being shot by police. So it's really just, I think, it's derived from that racism, that core racism.
That's my sentiment.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I have to. So we got some hot topics, y'all. Um, and then y'all pick what uh, you want to hit. But one of the cultural world wars, we got a list going. I'm gonna read them, and then just pick so we can break this down. Okay, we've got homosexuality, abortion, transgender rights, pornography, multiculturalism, racism, reverse racism, colorism, morality, religion, political views.
I'd like to deal with that colorism, if you will, for a
Come
few
on,
moments, because that's
come
been
on.
a huge topic even this week in a lot of families um, that I've been listening to. I chose not
Mhm.
to go to a typical Thanksgiving dinner this year, so I listened to a lot of conversations here in my home. Well, in my home, I listen to a lot of conversations of people calling on the sidelines. And a lot of people talked about how racist is what they said their family were. But when they got to talking, it's the pigments and the shades within the family that they were talking about inside of their own family. So apparently that's affecting more of our community
Ooh,
than we like to realize.
I agree. I agree with that. I'm gonna be really cautious. Let me say that because when it comes to colorism, I do think I'm not gonna say think. There is evidence that what you're saying is 100%. Where I have to agree, even in recent, I just was around family, and that's huge. Even jokes were made, and probably unconsciously because it's been normalized. Um,
Mm-hmm.
um, when it comes to colorism, but sadly, when it comes to colorism, this exists in multiple communities. We're talking
Mm-hmm.
Latin, we're talking African American, Asian, where the lighter
Yep.
complexion you are, it has been voiced, you're more acceptable. Um, which is huge because actually I was on social media and I should have logged off. And there was an artist who was having an exchange um, with, I guess it was their child's father. It was just a lot. But that was one of the things with the artist was pushing the narrative that this individual had, I guess, another child's mother who was not, both were minorities, and I'm trying to get the story right, y'all. I'm old. Both were minorities, uh, but the other individual pushed the narrative that my complexion, because of my complexion, and I'm of a lighter complexion, my beauty standards are more accepted, which is why the individual left me for you. But no one even looked at maybe the individual who is the core of it and keeping it going. A lot of times in our community, when it comes to colorism, a lot of times, and I only can speak in my community, sometimes I,
Mm.
we keep it going as a division. Um, we can look at the comedic realm where we have comedians, they will roast. They built their foundation on roasting people because they're a lighter complexion or because they're darker. Comedian, the African comedian, I can't think of his name right now, but you know, as soon as he comes on stage, they roast him because they say he's blue black. And even though, you know, everyone gets a chuckle out of it to kind of soften the blow, those actually exist. And I have, my family's a rainbow of colors, but when you sit down and talk to those individuals, when the shade gets a little darker, they're not as laughing as hard as the front and the brown end because a lot of the jokes is a direct effect. So yeah, I'm trying to be um that's a hard one. Let's just say that one. That's a hard one.
I was gonna say like colorism is definitely hard to tackle, especially within African American community, because a lot of times people, don't think that they can be prejudiced within their own community, or they'll try to cover it and like with. I was explaining it to my boyfriend, like, a lot of times as a black woman, we have to wonder if black men even like black women when getting
Oh,
into relationships where a lot of other races don't have to worry about whether or not their own people would like them. Um, and so not understanding that that's a whole part of colorism. And even when we see ourselves on like in movies and TV shows, a lot of times people will address colorism, and a lot of people in the black community will give them backlash because it's like, well, we should just be happy that we're on screen, like there's representation somewhere. And it's like, well, yeah, but we can still criticize that the representation is always a light skinned black girl with curly hair and never a dark skinned black girl with 4C hair. So,
mhm.
it's kind of like fighting a battle between in our own community and with the outward community of trying to get that representation. So colorism is always something that's hard to kind of address because it's always hard to just like identify sometimes. And then
To really
some,
identify and narrow it down. Nobody wants to
right.
claim it.
Exactly. Like
Yeah.
nobody was, well, I'm not colorist. Like you
Yeah.
are colorist. Nobody wants to say, because it's like almost like saying you're racist
You're a
as a
racist.
black person. It's like, well, I'm not racist. I'm
Yeah.
black. I can't
Yeah.
be racist, but it's
I
like you
can't
can be
be racist.
prejudiced.
Yeah. That
But
you
indeed you
have.
are.
Yeah, and some of it because I've been black a long time, my whole life. Some of this I think it's even unconscious. And St. Louis, you just brought up an incredible point, both of you guys, when it comes to this topic. Even looking at the African American male, where they have been in the forefront of colorism, even the initiating some of the conversations, not all, but even initiating the conversation, where they'll even say, "Oh, she's pretty for a dark skinned
For
girl,"
dark skin.
and I had never
I
heard that.
despise it.
I've never heard that um, until I had because I didn't have brothers, y'all. I had all sisters, and I had never heard that. And then, kind of like you saying, when I got married, that was a term, or even when I was dating. Let me just not say when I got married, but that was a term I heard quite a bit from my husband and his friends, and I didn't understand that. They was like, "Oh yeah, she's cute. She's just dark," and I was just like, "Whoa, whoa." So that was, and not just in the black community. I've heard it in the Latin community. I've heard it in the Italian community. I'm tan. I've
And there was a
heard
point I didn't even know that they could be dark skinned.
yes. Well, I because let me take this a little further.
I
Sammy
can also,
Social. Go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead.
um, and please forgive me because, like I said, I'm hoarse from all the yelling and screaming at my son's football games. But me myself, I have two cultures. I'm African American and I'm also Hispanic. My father is a black Hispanic man from Panama. There is a lot of colorism in the Latin American community, because they don't want that stigma of what African Americans or slaves received back in the day. So they don't want to be under that category. So they have a hard time with acknowledging their African roots. The Hispanic culture comes in many, 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 many colors. And it's hard for just people like my mother didn't even know my father was a black Hispanic man. She just thought he was black until later on. She was like, "You speak Spanish?" So he was like, "Yeah, I'm from Panama." So a lot of the times, my family members they'll say, "Hey, mi negrita," which means my little black girl. For someone looking, you know, out and looking in, they're probably like, "Did she just call you a little nigga?" But it's a term of endearment in the culture. Or even like my negra, mi morenita. Those are terms of endearment. But there is a lot of colorism within the Hispanic community because they don't understand that they come from African American ancestry. Or they probably do, but they're like, no, I'm Hispanic. Nope, nope, I'm Hispanic. I'm Hispanic. They will not want to claim it because of what stems from it. So that's, like I said, I have a really, really light colored cousins all the way down to really dark cousins. And a lot of them, like the older generation, would tell us, like, you know, get with a lighter complected man or woman to save the hair. So that is mostly what the colorism in the Latin community is. They want to save the hair. Why? I don't know. Because even if you're fully African American, which none of us are, our hair come in different textures. It just doesn't. Even some white people hair was curly, straight, and but it's a really big problem in the Latin American community. Even if you've heard of Amala La Negra from Love and Hip Hop Miami, she did
Yeah.
that a lot. She did a red table talk with I hear the song in my head, but I can't think of her name right now. But she expressed how being in the
Gloria
music or
Stefan.
yeah,
Yeah.
yes, Gloria Stefan and her sister. She expressed how she was the only black Hispanic on this huge show and expressed how her feelings were. And they downplay her feelings. But for the man, they was like, "Oh, I'm sorry. How did that made you feel?" But for her, they just was like, "No, your opinion didn't matter. That's not really true, but you had it going on. You were on TV." And it's like that's things that I even deal with within my black family. They're like, "Oh, you got the pretty boys. Your kids are the pretty boys and you're lighter and things like that." But I'm like, it doesn't matter. And then in my Hispanic side, it's like, "Oh, mi negrita, you're real dark." And to them, I'm dark. So, colorism is a really big thing. And sometimes it could
A
weigh on,
rough middle.
yeah, it can really weigh on you.
Mm.
Who brought
Yeah,
up?
and I think that really leads
Yeah.
into like
Yeah.
let's say it really leads into like the multiculturalism as well. Like people
Mhm.
who come from two different cultures or come from two different races, biracial people, they have a lot of like trouble navigating, their identity as they're growing up. Because especially like if they're mixed with some type of black or some type of darker race, it's like, I'm not black enough for the black groups, I'm not this enough for the this groups. And they're just like, I'm just me. Like, and you can see genetics is a very funny thing. Like, you'll have siblings who are, blood siblings, and they'll look totally different in with multiracial households because of the different chromosomes, the different like recessive and genes and
Man.
stuff like that. So they'll
Yeah.
come out, they'll be siblings. And I think it was on TikTok I was watching, and it was an Asian woman and I think a white man, or they're both like multiracial, I think. and they both had part Asian and part white and like part black. And one kid came out looking totally black, one kid came out totally Asian, one kid came out totally white. And it's like you'll never guess in a million years that they're all blood related siblings. Like people always think that they are adopted, the kids and stuff like that. But navigating that through racism and having to deal with racism within your own family,
then add that with the last conversation with your church. Inside of that, with your church family and all of that,
yeah,
you got a whole pot of mess.
Yeah.
Right. So you're dealing with like multiple traumatizations from within your household, outside.
All at once. And multiculturalism too, which is how it ties into all of racism, colorism. One of the things too, I remember just even you would never know it. Looking at her when I grew up with her, I thought she was black, and then she was like, "No, I'm actually." I think she was like, "I'm West Indian, and I'm from here, and I speak French." And it was crazy because people were saying, "No, you have to pick a side. You're here. You're in this classroom. You're in the hood. You don't speak French because when I look at you, you look black. So this is how you're going to present yourself." And that's huge. I mean, all the way around. And I'm like, but if French is her native language, why do others feel you can't be me unless I define who you are? Even going to hair. I remember if your hair was not like Miss Jones, okay, silky smooth, you were not accepted. If you came in with Miss St. Louis rocking your heritage boldly, pretty, just hair, what are you doing? They just passed the Crown Act saying Miss St. Louis can wear her hair however. But if we go into other communities, especially not picking on the Caucasian community, but especially in the Caucasian community, they will present hairstyles from other communities, from the Latin community, looking like Shakira, or presenting, I can't think of another artist, Beyonce, with the curly, big, wild hair. And they'll say, "Oh my goodness, you look so beautiful." But you will see the same hairstyle that was created on a minority, and they'll say, "What are you wearing your hair like that for? You look like a thug." That's unacceptable here in the workplace. And so a lot of it is systemic. It's here. It exists. It exists intimately too. I remember years ago dating a guy. I was bad. I didn't have my wig, and he was like, "I just wanted to see you," and he was so you're just gonna wear your hair like you can. I'll take my time if you want to go and straighten it or put a wig on, to basically say that texture that's not satisfying. You can't do that here. Somebody else brought up a point about how can you be racist in your own culture? Does reverse racism exist? I think that's a sticky. As a minority, hold on, y'all. As a minority, can you say, if I say something, I'm being racist? Because this is a topic conversation. I have a rainbow slew of friends, and they will say things, and I'm like, "Yo, that's not cool." They're like, "Oh, it's cool. I'm a minority like you, so I can say it." Or some people use a derogatory word and say, "I have a black child's father, so I can use that word."
Yeah, so to me personally, I don't really think reverse racism is a thing. I definitely think that people of minority cultures can definitely be prejudiced and have malice towards other, or like the same way that how the typical white people are racist to black people or other minorities. I feel like they can still have that same type of sentiments. But for me, racism comes from a place of power that minorities do not have within this system. So that systemic racism does not work for minorities like it does for Caucasians. So I do feel like we can have the same like hate sentiment and stuff, but when it comes to actually making a difference within the system, our racist like ideals don't change or affect the way that that particular minority is going to I don't know if it makes sense, but like me saying this is just an example, but for say I really didn't like the Asian community for whatever reason. Me hating them is not going to change anything in the system for them. Versus as with racism, you see it's systemic, it's in programs. So a lot of people with minorities don't get certain benefits like Caucasians do, or you know. We're seen as lower class sometimes in certain areas that we live, or certain hairstyles that we do, but on Caucasian people it's like, oh my god, it's amazing, like you look so cute, and it's like, no, they stole that from our culture. So I think a lot of it has to do with whether or not there is power within do we have the power within the system to make any difference within that particular community's life. And I don't feel like as minorities we do, but I do feel like we can still have those same hateful sentiments, and I do feel like it is detrimental sometimes. But as far as to call it racism, that's why I don't call it racism or reverse racism, just for that power component. But we definitely can be prejudiced and have that hate, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I definitely see your point. Okay. Anybody else?
I'm still trying to think that one through a little bit, because it definitely happens. And in certain areas, depending on where your tax dollar goes, it definitely affects where you are, who you are, what you are, reverse or whatever. So I'm still trying to work through that one a little bit.
Mm-hmm. So reverse racism is definitely systematic. But keep
Yeah.
in mind, we're getting in positions of some level of power. Now, let me pause. Do we know there are women judges? Because keep in mind, people forget, as a woman, the first thing you see for me is I'm black. Then you see I'm a woman. If I go into my other counterparts, where we're going into the Asian culture, the first thing you'll see is if there's Japanese, Vietnamese, Korean, then they identify
The
as
one.
sex. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
After they say you're Chinese, you're Arab, you're an Arab woman. That's usually afterwards. So I get a little standoffish when I hear the word reverse racism, because it has a platform. But I was struggling with the power piece, because when you look at races, there is a power play behind it. Look at the White House and Ahmad. Look at Brianna. Her whole trial, they literally said, yeah, we had the warrant. Yeah, we went in the wrong house. And nobody got time, but her walls, the neighbor's walls, not even hers, the neighbor's walls, because they were shot into, okay, was the only thing that was addressed as an issue. Not that this was a public servant, not that this was a man protecting his woman and his home, not that you came into the wrong house with a no knock warrant and excessively shot a woman who is supposed to be, keep in mind, let's go back to our culturalism. As a woman, we're supposed to be delicacy. This is what society's put out there. But there has never been a story of excessive shooting when it comes to the white woman. Now, you hear it in the Latin community. You hear it in actually, to me, when you start looking at biracial, it their racism is as high as if you were of a darker complexion, because They're saying you better choose a side. Choose a side and stay over there. You can't enjoy your whole culture. So I get a little I struggle with reverse racism. And the only reason why I'm going to say that is because I look at it from a systemic view. And a lot of times when I am helping out clientele, it's really hard to communicate with them when they're saying, um, Mrs. Gregory, especially if the clientele is of a majority. They were saying this to me and they were being racist to me, and but they can't explain to me what effects that individual had on them. But if I talk to a minority and they say they were being racist to the point it affected my finances, they're being racist to the point that I am incarcerated and in the penal system for doing anything. If and this is multiple minorities, so that one I kind of is evolving. Let me just say that it's it's one that it kind of just throws me for a loop a little bit. Um, I'm just gonna leave it like that. Another one I wanted to talk about was at the top was abortion. Why is abortion a cultural war? Why? Is it because we're
It's
done
a
now?
world war.
Yeah, it's a war. It is. Let's switch it. Why is abortion a war? Why?
It's basically off of religion.
Yeah, it's
It's
stemmed
the
into a
religion
lot.
aspect of it. Mhm.
Go ahead, Miss Sanchez.
No, I was just saying, like, it just stems off of the religion of each, throughout the world and what their beliefs are. Like in the Latin American community, they're Catholic. Majority of them are Catholic, I should say, and they are against abortion. And then I can speak on myself. In my African American family, they all they're pro, right? Whatever you for, you want to have abortion, but it just depends. You might have that old grandma that's and she's Bible based, and she's like, nope, I'm totally against abortion. So I think abortion just goes back to religion.
Mm-hmm.
I think that I totally agree with that. And I also want to sit on the stance of with religion, even with people, it goes back to a power play. I think that's how it becomes the war with the the world. Whose play is bigger?
Yeah,
Whose law is it gonna go down to? Whose word is final? Whose dollar is more?
Yeah,
I
exactly. I was gonna say, I think a lot of it did stem from religion, and but I think a lot of it. So now, like the heart of the people who don't or like abortions or think abortions are wrong. I think it does stem from religion, but I think once you get higher up in with politicians and stuff like that, I think they are just trying to appease their constituents, whether they believe in abortion or not. Depending on what their demographic is or who their constituents are, you have to please your constituents. So sometimes you gotta take a stance against abortion if that's what your constituents want. And so I do think, like Ms. Jones was saying, it definitely has something to do with power now, and a lot of times, where the money is going, who's donating to these people. If it's anti-abortion groups that's donating, you're not
yeah.
going to go and then sign an abortion bill that you're going to go and you make sure that you're making them happy so they can still continue to contribute. So I think a lot of it gets muddled within that power and money as well, but definitely started from a religion standpoint and um, a basis. Even though the country was supposed to be founded on free religion,
Mm-hmm.
I feel like one religion definitely runs a lot of decisions that are made within our political structure.
And then if you really think about that stance that they're standing on, it's not biblical. It's not what
Right.
they're standing on. You're really fighting against what you're standing on. The basis of what your fight is it's not sound.
And my question is this. I so agree with you just saying this, Joe. My question is this: why do we have so much anti-abortion and it's so many laws, but and this is just a social worker in me. Why don't we get that same feedback when it comes to the mass children in foster care? I don't
Why don't
understand
we
why
get the
we
same feedback with murder?
what,
With the actual people standing here that they just pow pow, or why
yeah.
don't we get that feedback with that?
Oh, I agree. I don't understand it.
I'm trying
I
to
don't
understand it
understand it.
all. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah,
That what they're saying, the basis of it is the religion that the country is found on. It's not sound. You totally knock it every time you open up with a new law.
every time.
Mm.
I didn't really. That really kind of threw me for a loop. One because it's thrown out there. You go to clinics. Keep in mind these are free clinics for people who can't afford regular checkups, trying to avoid any type of STDs or any type of cancer. They're doing preventive care and they can't even get through the door. But I do not see the same energies on other issues. I don't see the same issue on domestic violence, where you have someone. We can go back to Florida, where the lady was in a domestic violence relationship for years, and she shot 2 shots in the air, had a restraining order, and said, "This man is going to kill me." And she got 15 to 20 something years for shooting a gun in the air for someone who had beat this lady. She had pictures of the damage that he did. I had a client. I did sexual assault and domestic violence for 4 years. And I couldn't believe this man did everything. He kept coming to the shelter. He threatened staff. And it wasn't until he killed that dog. Y'all hear me? It wasn't until he killed that lady's dog he went to jail. And he's in jail to this day for killing Fido. So it gets a little touchy when we have these wars, even with pornographic material. In our field, we deal with so many. I have clients where they can't even get on the internet because of the lack of it. But it's you. Hold on, y'all. Someone just said, a religious figure just said that I want women to cover up. Then you have them saying, no, embrace, be sexual, know your body. Then it's hot girl summer.
This
Y'all
last
see
month's
that?
conversation.
What is it? What is it? So is it religion? Is this the culture that stems from religion? Is this the culture that stems from self-empowerment? What is this? I
It's
don't.
a man. It's men and whatever they say, basically, because I feel as though the man has the rights over, or they feel like they have the rights, and they have the power to dictate what it is a woman should and should not be doing, how we handle our bodies. Just like you have the men in Texas that's saying, nope, we're against abortions, but you don't see anything in place that says a man should have a hysterectomy if he has too many kids and not taking care of them. There isn't any laws that states anything about a man's body, but there's so many laws on what a woman can and cannot do with her own body. So I feel like it is a man's power trip over um over the women, just period. I really believe that wholeheartedly.
Absolutely, absolutely. Um, One of the biggest things they talk about, just moving us out of the topic, is that we define cultural trauma. We define the basis of a lot of the narratives and subjects that we're actually have to be subjected to. But one of the biggest things is, how do you heal from it? Because this is going to exist. Someone will always come up to me and say, "Oh, you're for a brown girl, you're all right," or "You're pretty for a big girl." This will always exist. Um, "Oh, you look okay with your hair like that." What language and sense of normalcy can I give that life balance for an individual who's coming and saying, "How do I heal from this?" Because it's going to exist. It's going to be here. It's systemic. What do we do? Do we change the narrative? Do we alter the existence of it? Do we ignore it? Do we
I
challenge
think
it?
with that, it depends on the person, the person, the people, the group, the body, where you are. With one of those questions you asked, um, well, I'll just use this one. And they told, "Oh, you're pretty for a dark skinned girl." I'm one of the darker ones in my family, and I look extra light right now. I got my lighter hue going on. But when they would tell us that you're pretty for a dark skinned girl, well, no, I'm pretty anyway. Or you could wear your hair like that, or I like your hair like that. You should keep it like that. I'm glad you give me permission. If you don't give me permission, I'm going to choose it however I choose it that day anyway. You redirect yourself. However, you have to redirect yourself. Whatever body you're in, I say take heed, take precaution, choose wisely. If you need to redirect your life, your lifestyle choice, redirect that, because that may be hurting you.
Mm,
I
mm,
was going to say, make sure for cultural trauma, a lot of things are outside of our control. A lot of things have happened in the past that we have no control over. Therefore, there's nothing, I would say there's nothing we can do, but in
yeah.
our day to day lives, there's not much we can do to change it, the whole system overnight. So,
Mm-hmm.
learning to have healthy coping mechanisms, I think, is very crucial in terms of healing from cultural trauma and not being re traumatized. That's a word. Um,
Yeah.
because
That's what I work here.
it just help you kind of get a grip of, not like this is what life is supposed to be, but this is the situation in which you're dealing with now. Things are not going to change overnight. We can work to continue to make those progressive changes, but being able to cope with it when it happens, and understanding that, it's not everybody, it's not everything. This doesn't happen every single day. Um, Hopefully, but having those, healthy coping mechanisms so that when you do experience something of cultural trauma, that you are able to, um, overcome it and not get trapped in it.
I would say a way to heal from it is stopping it when it happens. Being bold to say, I don't like how you made me feel when you said that, or I don't like how you made me feel when you did this. And I've done that a lot with my Hispanic family. Like I said, I have cousins who look white, and they'll be like, "Oh, I'm Panamanian, Panamanian, Panamanian," and won't embrace the black part of them. And they may say, "Oh, I don't like black people," and I look at them like, "What? Do you not see what you are?" And providing that knowledge. Like I tell people all the time, Hispanic is an ethnicity, is not a race. So when you see it, you have to kind of be bold to stop it. I think those are ways to heal because they don't really understand or know that they're doing something wrong. And if we just harbor those feelings and not really say, I didn't like how you did that, or let me correct you in this, and this is another way you could look at it. I've helped a lot of my cousins that way that may be like, I don't really like black men like that, or I don't like black women like that. And I'm like, well, what do you think you are? If I stop them and correct them, then because they was like, oh, well, my grandfather is black. Yeah, he's tar. So what do you think you are? If we stop them there and correct them and provide the knowledge, that's a healing point. That has helped me along the way a lot of times because I couldn't understand. But when I heard something I didn't agree with, I stopped it right there. I deaded it. Like, no, we're not going to do that. You know, this is why I feel the way I feel. What you said was hurtful, and you need to do a little bit more research on what you're saying. So I think those are healing mechanisms that help me in a sense.
I like all of that, which you guys said. Everyone, oh, went too far. Everyone is 1,000% correct. And everyone hit it before I even went down to it. Um, that's the path to healing. Ms. Jones talked about individually, um, structural within the family, correcting it internally, because a lot of times what we see ourselves, we manifest it on others, we project it.
Mm-hmm.
So starting that healthiness individually, and then starting with our family. Ms. Sanchez just said it. She was like, "Wait, what do you keep in mind? We derive from the same blood, So what are we doing? And then also, um, trying to address the community that in this bubble, that's we won't have that. Or even I remember someone had posted something, might have even been you, Miss Jones, and which was such a powerful, where you were talking about healing and the religious structure. And I can't remember exactly. And someone posted it and said, "Oh, that was," and dismissed it. And the whole community came, and
Yeah.
joined in. It was like, no, 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 no. And it deaded the individual from spreading it's, and when people don't understand, ignorance is the lack of knowledge. Sometimes people choose to be unknowledgeable, but having that community come and say, wait a minute, there's evidence, this exists, their experience exists. No one has to agree with it, but acknowledge that the experience exists. And that's what everyone is saying. There's a short video here on YouTube. I don't know if it's going to play, but I just want someone to just see it. I listed it here. But it's just saying, it's 5 minutes, and it talks about cultural healing. And it's multiple women from different ethnicities saying that a lot of times we confuse therapy with healing. But it is one thing to have the healthy space like we did to talk, but now you have to go and balance it out with healing. And the only one who knows that is that individual. The only one who knows that is the family structure. The only one who knows what they need as far as healing is the community. One of the other ones saying that according to research, that the biggest cultural trauma healing is starting by connecting to other people. Um, and then someone else said this, I don't know who, but telling your own story and be in control of the narrative, is huge, because a lot of times we see this a lot. Somebody will come and tell your story, and you like, what? Who gave you permission to speak on the deep roots that I have been through? And we see that a lot. I think Ms. Sanchez said it. We see that a lot in male privilege. No one wants to talk about that, but that exists. We see that a lot where they will control the narrative. A woman is beautiful because we set the standards. But a minute you have a woman, there's the artist Megan Thee Stallion and Cardi, and I hope I'm saying this right, Cardi B, when they came out with the narrative, and in the narrative they said, "Oh, I am beautiful and I can wear this, and that." They got backlash because now you had women controlling the narrative, which wasn't something that we were able to do before. One of the other thing they talked about was being mindful and just trying mindful meditation and healing. That was kind of where Ms. St. Luce was talking about finding your coping skills. What works for me is not going to work for Ms. St. Luce. I may be able to meditate for 5 minutes. But some people, they say, I pray. And they could be healing in the very religious dynamic, like we talked about last time, where they were broken. And then one of the other things they kind of gave this, I don't know if you guys can see this, where they talked about the possibility of reconciliation. And it goes, I just love this figure. I'm a big on figures, but it talks about how you break out in the cycle of violence, but from a culture standpoint. And it talks about first You got to discover your story. What does that like? Because keep in mind, so many people control the narrative, and then making things right, the justice of it. And then over here, we've got the backlash of the violence, the harm, and all that comes from the trauma of it. But then learning to break out from it, and then willing to take that risk, kind of like what Miss Sanchez said, and educate somebody. Wait, what are you saying? I'm pretty because I'm pretty. I'm not pretty for a brown girl. I'm not pretty by your standards. Okay. There's a meme that says, what is it? Don't worry about it, because I know somebody who loves it, and I'm probably saying it all wrong, but it was on TikTok or whatever, and that's one of the things. And then I had to tell myself, yeah, I'm that person that loves it. I love it, every crease of me. And once I started with the internal health, external couldn't do anything but come behind. But this is just a really, really good chart. I just love it on the healing journey and how they're breaking it down. But one of the biggest things they talk about is just be open to doing it differently. Nobody's going to be open to doing it differently. Y'all, this is it. We got resources because I don't do plagiarism. I didn't come up with all this on my own at all. But it talks about the cultural war. The biggest thing I stemmed from was CLAPS, the Center for Law and Policy, by Dr. Nia West-Bay. She's a historian and also specializes in culture. And that's it. Any questions for anybody? We'll have this up for a while. You can also did anybody want to give, I'm sorry, before I let me end, did anybody want to give their contact information one more time before we end? Because I didn't want to jump.
Sure. No. So yeah, my email again is my first name, MAKILA, dot my last name, STLUCE, @gmail.com.
My email is admiredj, ADMIREDJ @gmail.com.
Thank you guys for coming in with us. We appreciate it. And I'm just going to stop it here. And then we'll see you guys next month. Our series ends. We go on a break. We won't see you guys until the new year. I want to always thank my panelists that came this time. It's chosen Miss St. Luce for rocking with us. And I want to thank Miss Sanchez for coming in and also joining us today. And you guys enjoy your whole morning and day, okay?
Thanks, you all too.
Have a good one. Have a good Happy New Year.
Bye. Bye.